getting your signal from there to here, or here to there. Anyways, we're talking about studio to transmitter links today. Today is day 7 of my quarantine, so it's my last day. Well, technically it's day 14, but anyways, tonight at 7:30, my quarantine is over. I am so excited about that. I've experienced no symptoms this whole time, so fortunately, everything is good. So tomorrow, back to work and back into the grind of things. So the world of studio to transmitter links is what we're talking about today. It's one of the more fragile parts of the broadcast air chain, and it's the delivery path of getting your audio from the studio all the way to the transmitter site. Hence the term studio to transmitter link, STL. Sometimes it's easy, and if your transmitter is in the same location as your studio, then your studio to transmitter link is a cable that goes into the other room where the transmitter is. No big deal. But oftentimes your transmitter is in a far location, like top of a mountain or out in the middle of a field or whatever. Usually your studios are not with the transmitters these days. So there are some, more, those stations are more in the middle of the country where they have the ability to have the studio and the transmitter in the same place. But a lot of times here in the West, where it's really mountainous, you want to have that transmitter really up high because it's all about line of sight. And so if your transmitter can see more area, then that's where you want it. And it's not practical to have everybody drive up a mountain all the time. So anyways, essentially there's 4 types of STLs that we normally use in broadcast. It's microwave, IP, T1, and satellite. And it's not exactly clear-cut either because IP can be transported over almost all of those. In fact, you can transport IP over all of those different links. Over a microwave, over a T1, and over satellite, you can send IP. But when I say IP, I'm talking about more of your non-traditional STLs. I'm talking things like DSL or cable modems or things like that. But we'll cover that here in a moment. Reliability is really what's important when you are looking at an STL. So having more than one link is going to give you that redundancy and that reliability, because having all of your eggs in one basket, as they say, is not good. And it's not always to have them all in the same intermediary. So for example, if you have a T1 and you have DSL, well, those both go through the phone company. And in some places, those circuits have some point where they converge before getting delivered to your facility. So if you are counting on that DSL to be your backup and the phone company has problems, well, you just kind of lost both. So having redundancy is important. Having one path go through the phone company, having another path that you control, like a microwave link, and having another path go through another provider, like, say, for example, satellite. Redundancy is a key to your reliability. So let's go down on the different methods. The first one that I talked about was microwave. It's an older technology. I mean, there's older technologies like what are called broadcast loops, and those are basically special phone lines that were equalized to carry program audio. And they would sound way better than your normal phone line that you have today. So those are becoming extremely expensive to maintain and to keep installed. The phone company is actively trying to deter people from having those type of lines. They won't service them anymore, and your monthly rate on those are going through the roof. So we're not going to really talk about broadcast loops. But microwave is kind of like the next older technology, if you will. So microwave can be an analog microwave link, and there's fewer and fewer of those these days, but it's like your two-way radio, but it sounds a lot better, obviously. But it's your two-way radio, and it'll carry the audio from point A, your studio, to point B, which is your transmitter site. Now, your microwave links can also be digital these days, and there are a couple of manufacturers that have microwave equipment these days. One of which is a company called Mosley up in Santa Barbara, and we have one of those, and it just works. I mean, it is very reliable. It is on a lower frequency than most of the other microwave links that are up on the mountain, so it gives a little bit more resiliency. That's a path that we control. And so if there's a problem with the phone company, then the phone company deals with that. But we can fall back on our microwave link and still have audio delivered to the station. The next one is T1. And a T1 is basically I don't want to get too technical about the intricacies of the phone company phone lines, but a T1 is basically 1.5 megs of data, essentially, that gets delivered to a location. And there's different kinds of T1s, and the one kind that we have that is still not super expensive yet is a point-to-point T1, and that is what's called circuit switched. And that means basically there is an electronic signal that goes straight from our facility all the way up to the mountain, essentially. Now, all the new stuff that is installed today is all packet switched. So it basically is IP that goes from your site to the end site. But nowadays, that is a cheaper way for the phone company. Anyways, I'm getting distracted on this discussion. So a T1, you can have equipment on both ends that basically convert your audio to digital, goes over that 1.5 megs, and delivers your audio on the other side perfectly. Perfect quality. Now it can also carry other ancillary services as well. It can carry IP on the leftovers of the T1. It can carry serial data. It could even extend a phone line to the other side. So you could, if you had an extension phone, you could extend it across that and have the phone up at the transmitter site ring on an extension. Now, one of the more cooler technologies is satellite. I mean, it's space. How cool is that? So we're taking our signal and basically converting it to digital, converting it to packets, and we're shooting it up into space 22,360 miles away, sitting over the equator, going the same speed as the Earth rotates, so that way it's always looking at one specific part of the Earth, and that's called geosynchronous orbit. And so with that, we are sending that, the 22,360 miles up, and the satellite is basically turning that back down to all the area that it can see, and again, another 22,360 miles away. And so we can receive that at our different downlink sites, our different transmitter sites. It converts it into audio, and then from audio into the transmitter, boom, there's an STL. Now, there are some satellite delivery methods that have IP. And so, again, like I said earlier, IP can be transported on almost anything. Remember back in the older days, some of you who are watching this don't know this, because you never had fun with modems, like the old telephone modems, where you hear the kind of noise. But that was all IP basically. And so IP can be carried on anything. But when people think about IP, they're thinking DSL or cable modems or something like that, or Ethernet delivered to your facility. And talking about those type of STLs, there's lots of boxes on the market. We use one called Comrex. And the Comrex box, you put audio into it, you plug your IP connection into it, and it goes into the internet. On the other side, you plug your audio output, and you plug your IP, and they both have IP addresses, and the transmitting end says, I'm looking to connect to this IP address. It makes that connection, and now you have data going across. Now, the nice thing about this, about using a service like that, is that you also have other ways of controlling your transmitter sites. You always need to have control and know what's going on, telemetry. So your control and telemetry are backhauled basically over that IP link. Boom! You get to take care of two birds with one stone, as they like to say. So the IP side of things is kind of the new future. And I did say that you can do IP over almost anything. And so another link that we have is an IP microwave link. And in fact, if you watch this channel and you know that I have a live stream up from Santiago Peak, that live stream is being brought back via that IP microwave link that we have from our studio to the transmitter site. So, I mean, these studio to transmitter site links can carry a lot of data if you get the more expensive ones. Or you could get them where they're super reliable. We have one that goes to our undisclosed location, and it can carry a lot of data, but I have it cranked down in a certain way where it's super reliable. So no matter what kind of atmospheric conditions that are in between, it's super reliable, and I have that data link because on the low side it's only a T1 feeding it, so I can't really do too much data. Flipping back to satellite for a minute, there are pros and there are cons. Pros is that you don't have to have telephone wires that go to your site or IP lines that go to your site. You could be a site out in the middle of the desert that has just power, or even running it off of solar or running it off of a generator. And so you have no connection to the outside world other than what you bring in by microwave and satellite. So satellite, I mean, it's a link to it, and so you can deliver audio that way. So the downside to satellite is that, again, because you're sending it 22,360 miles up and 22,360 miles back, your issue is going to be rain, snow, clouds. I mean, all of those things together will attenuate the RF getting up and coming back. So that's a drawback. Another drawback is if you're in a location that gets snow. Many of our mountaintop sites, almost all of our mountaintop sites, get snow, and at times it gets enough snow to build up on the satellite dish, and if you don't have a heated dish, well, that snow is going to be there until either it melts from the weather or you go and brush it off. So having a heated dish is helpful, but those are expensive. And wind can hit the dish and start oscillating it, and it's a little tiny pinpoint that it's looking at over the equator. And so if that wind is oscillating your dish, it's throwing it off a good amount. Or if the wind is strong enough, it completely throws it off. If it should be looking here, the wind pushes it, and now it's looking over here at a completely different satellite. So that's not good either. And all of that, or even ice. I've seen ice build up on the L&B, and that's like the little antenna part at the front. So you have your dish, and there's that little part that's out the front. That's the L&B, and that's the antenna basically. So on the transmitter end, if you have equipment that can intelligently switch between multiple different STLs, that's going to help the station greatly. Sometimes you'll hear a little glitch, a little dropout here and there, and that could be the equipment going, okay, this path is becoming unreliable. If it's an IP path, sometimes it detects that there's a lot of jitter or a lot of dropouts, and so then it'll switch over to something else that could be more reliable. And so the equipment should be able to switch. And many times it's just silence. If this link dies and just goes silent, then it goes, uh-oh, and switches over to another link. So now that's studio to transmitter links for radio and basically TV as well. They're essentially the same. And so if you ever were curious, well, there you go. You've seen me go to different sites. You've seen me work on some of our microwave equipment and our T1 equipment. So those were our STLs. And if you're interested, maybe I could get a friend of mine to come on and we can discuss digital delivery, because delivering things like this video, YouTube, Netflix, those different types of content is different, obviously, but it doesn't mean it's any less complex. In fact, it's more complex, and it's kind of cool in how it does it, and it's not exactly how you think it does it. So if you want to see that, leave me some comments below, and I can get a hold of my friend and bring him on, and we'll talk about content delivery online. All right, back to the office room tomorrow. I have so many things piled up. It's not funny. Anyways, if I can, I'll bring you along. If not, well, at least I'm back. That's good. Anyways, we will see you next time. Stay safe, stay healthy.